Welcome to the Dark Shadows Podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Tom Diamond, and Keith Chowgle, bringing you all the odd goings-on from Collinsport, Maine.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, Rondo-nominated podcast. And today we're discussing Dark Shadows episodes 222 to 243. And of course, we have with us Vicky Ray. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, everybody.
And Tom Diamond. And as we like to do our Roses and Thorns segment. So what we're going to do is our Roses and Thorns, starting with Tom. So, Tom, what is your Roses and Thorns?
And hi, everybody, by the way. We have, because of, as Keith was explaining to us before we started, we have a slow internet connection because they're being utilized.
I can hear you just fine, sweetie.
In the UK and the US. And so I didn't hear when Keith said hi, Tom. So, but anyway, hi, everybody. And the Roses and Thorns. Okay, so my two roses. I completed the move that we were doing. We completed, Sharon and I completed the move that we were doing last weekend, and so we got that out of the way. It turned out to be a lot bigger than we had anticipated in terms of getting stuff together, because I closed my old apartment up, which was a half hour away, and then drove back down to Sharon's old apartment where we got all the furniture and whatever.
I hate moving. It's got to be one of the most painful experiences of a lifetime.
It's extremely stressful.
It's also the most liberating, because you learn to throw away a lot of crap at the same time. So
yeah.
Roses and Thorns of moving.
Although I still have my book collection now in storage, most of it anyway. And
you can't give up your books. That's one thing I don't compromise.
Well, I've had them for over 40, 50 years. I do want to get rid of them.
But you might ever want to revisit them. That's all I got to say. I
made a vow to her, but she thinks it's crazy that I'm going to read all the ones I haven't read before I sell them, and I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but it is definitely a project. And so I'm going to start looking into selling stuff that I've read. I have first edition. No, I have first trade edition of Stephen King, for instance. And I don't need to, from the old days, and I don't need them anymore. So, that's one thing. I have a whole lot of Star Trek novels, paperbacks, and that I've never, but anyway, I don't want to start doing a plug for me. But anyway, so that's, so that move, and the fact that I am holding steady between 58 and 60 pounds down.
I think you look fabulous. For anybody who doesn't know Tom, he looks fabulous.
Well, I thank you, Vicky. I'm very flattered. Let's get togetger. No, I'm serious. No, seriously. I have. Well, Vicky smiled when I said
time. Let's get together. What do you say?
Let's get together. No. Thank you very much, fans.
We all actually be looking like shit, but we're in the coronavirus thing together. So
this is true. True. Vicky has her husband. I have my fiance. We're kidding kids. But anyway, the thorn, I'm going to say the coronavirus. I think that's everybody's thorn at this point. Keith can speak more to that because
Are you sick of it? I'm really sick of it.
Everybody is sick of being sick. Let's put it that way. Keith is obviously in the front lines, having working.
I know. I'm worried about my baby every day. He's my gay husband. He is. That's what he always told himself. In 2015, he goes, "Yep, I'm your gay husband." I could tell him anything.
There you go. Well, So getting back, so we're putting up with it. The streets are empty in Florida, where we are, and
What city you
I'm in the house a lot, doing my stuff because I'm in the age range that you have to be careful. Vicky is just getting over something, and I hope she feels better. But she was stuck for a little while. She was telling me. So that's what's going on. So that's what's going on with me.
What about you, Keith?
Well, my roses and thorns.
I don't even want to know. Wait. Because y'all can't see his face.
Well,
Keith is multitasking.
I mean, to be honest, what I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to get a thorn, which is going to be a public address announcement to everyone out there. Self-isolation is for the benefit of the weak, and it's for the benefit of the elderly. It's also to protect yourself. It is very, very important that the reason why we do this is because we need to work as a community and work together. Anybody who's moaning and groaning about being self-isolated, thank God it wasn't 15 years ago, because we have streaming services. We got enough at home to keep you occupied. Things that you need to remember: if you're immunosuppressive, if you have underlying lung conditions, if you're elderly, you need to be restricted in your self-isolation. Everyone else, you need to take care of your self-isolation. You can wear a mask if it makes you feel better, but the thing is, what you must do at all times is wear gloves. The reason why you wear gloves, they can be cloth gloves, they can be leather gloves, they can be surgical gloves, whatever gets you by. If you're going to the supermarket, you wear your gloves. This is not an airborne virus. This is a surface virus. Basically, it lives on surfaces for up to 72 hours. So if someone sneezed or coughed or talked and spittled anywhere around, and 72 hours, that hasn't been cleaned properly, you touch it, you touch your face, voila, you might have the coronavirus. So what you need to do, basically, if you go to the supermarket and you wear your gloves, then what you do is when you take your credit card to pay, you keep your gloves on. Then what you do is you pay for your stuff. Then what you will do is you will come home. If they're cloth gloves, throw those in the washing machine. Then you're going to antibacterial your credit card, your wallet, and then you're going to antibacterial your leather gloves if they're leather gloves. And if they're surgical gloves are meant to be thrown away. You do not wear those for the whole day because it defeats the purpose. So then what you do is you wash your hands. If people come over to your house, what you need to do is wash all your surfaces, because people speak, and make sure you keep 6 to 8 feet away from people at this point in time. If everyone adheres to these simple little tips, and to be honest, as far as washing your hands, you should have been doing this since nursery school. This is, keeping clean 101, people. So if you're everyone, all you need to be is have a little bit of common sense and a little bit of conscientiousness. Look out for your fellow man, and let's work together as a community, and we can do better. And as soon as everyone does this, I'm sure we'll get past this.
We can all get the hell out of this hell we're in, because I'm sick of it. I love Netflix and Amazon Prime, but I'm fucking sick of it.
And I think we need to remember that this is only for now. It's only for now, And 5 years from now, we'll be asking questions. Where were you during 9/11? Where were you during the O.J. Simpson trial? And where were you during the coronavirus? So it will just be something to look back on.
Who is this guy with all the tigers in Oklahoma? Everybody keeps telling me about. I've got to find out who this man is.
Now, my rose of the week, I want to thank all our new 800 subscribers to our Facebook page and all my 5,000 new friends that I have on Facebook. Thank you all.
Because y'all think Keith is hot. It's like, I don't get it, but okay.
And I do want to thank you all, because I've seen that you're all sharing our posts and everything to all the multitudes.
Thank you.
We are going... Yep. We have gone global,
Absolutely.
And I want to thank everyone for doing that. But the one thing I need to thank is all the people in the UK. Last night at 8 o'clock, my neighbors knocked on the door, and at 8 o'clock, the whole country clapped for the NHS to show their support.
That was excellent. Yes, I heard that.
And I actually had to say, I actually felt quite
appreciated.
honored, actually. And when my neighbors knocked on the door, I was like, oh, sort of thing. But so I want to thank the UK for actually showing their support for the NHS and everything like that. And currently I'm dealing with over 600 patients with the coronavirus, and we're dealing with it, and our fatalities are extremely low because we're doing quite a good job with it. So thank you all my brothers and sisters in the NHS. And I guess on that note, I guess we go to Vicky about her roses and thorns. Take it away, Vicky.
Oh, yeah, my roses and thorns. I actually don't really have any this week. But I would say my rose is kind of like people coming together finally. It's taken something like this to make everybody congeal and say, oh, my God, we're all in this together. I don't know how everybody else is doing out there. I find this all really frustrating. I'm sure everybody else does. But we are all in this together. And, there's nothing else you can do other than you can't clap, you can't hold hands, you can't do anything. But it's a lot better than bitching on social media. So let's not do that anymore because it just makes people upset. Anyway, on top of that, I would say, was that my rose or my thorn?
It sounds like a mixture of both, actually. It didn't sound very optimistic, and it sounded a bit pessimistic.
I don't even know how to even complacently put things in one compartmental anything this week. I think that we're all going through something that we never expected in our lifetime. And I think we all need to take care of each other. And that's pretty much all I got to say about it.
So what we do before we go into the thick and thin of Dark Shadows, we have a special guest star, which we are joining forces with on the podcast called Story Geek. And because we're in the coronavirus and looks like most of us are going to be basically isolated for the next 12 weeks or maybe longer, God forbid. So what they've decided to do is they're giving us a segment that we'll be giving out each week to tell you what you can watch and how you can entertain yourself while you're stuck in and being a shut-in. So take it away, Story Geek.
What's currently available to watch right now from home? I'm Jay Shear, co-host of the Story Geeks podcast, and for the next couple weeks, I'll be focusing this segment on movies you can watch from home. Here's a list of the movies that have left theaters early, but will be available for you to watch from home. This list comes from Vanity Fair, and the movies coming early to streaming are The Gentleman, which is a Guy Ritchie gangster film, Birds of Prey, which is Margot Robbie's R-rated superhero movie, Sonic the Hedgehog, Emma, The Invisible Man, Pixar's Onward, which is also available to Disney Plus subscribers on April 3rd, The Way Back, the Ben Affleck comeback film, The Hunt, Bloodshot, the Vin Diesel superhero movie, and I Still Believe, the biopic about Jeremy Camp. Those all left theaters early and will be available for you to purchase soon. Also, on the StoryGeeks.com, I put out a list of science fiction and fantasy movies I highly recommend you check out on Netflix. Here are my top 5. If you want the full list, go to thestorygeeks.com. Coming in at number 5, Hook. It's a movie about Peter Pan starring Robin Williams, which is fantastic, only it's not very Disney-like. I highly recommend you revisit this. I think it's a really fun family film. It is number 5 on my list. Coming in at number 4, The Dark Knight, one of my favorite movies from Christopher Nolan. If you haven't seen The Dark Knight, it is one of the best superhero films or comic book films of all time. Another film from Christopher Nolan, Inception, all about dreams and ideas. It's a very heady film, but well worth your time. We actually got a chance to talk to Yusuf, who's played by Dilip Rao, on the Story Geeks podcast, which was fantastic. So check out the movie, then you can go listen to our podcast with Yusuf or Dilip Rao as well. Coming in at number 2, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I feel like a lot of people didn't watch this movie because it's animated, but the reality is this is one of the best comic book movies of all time. I know I said that about The Dark Knight, but it's also true about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and it's on Netflix right now. And coming in at number 1, a little bit of a cheat from me, but the entire Indiana Jones trilogy, and if you want to throw Crystal Skull in there too, feel free to do so. It's all out on Netflix. Those are my top 5 science fiction and fantasy movies on Netflix right now. Plenty of stuff for you to check out. If you want my entire list, which is just about 20 movies, includes my full top 10 plus some honorable mentions, head over to thestorygeeks.com. My pick of the week of all the movies I've mentioned is actually Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Again, I think it's a fantastic film, easily rewatchable if you've already seen it, and deserves all of the praise that it has received. On the latest The Story Geeks podcast, we talked all about how science fiction and fantasy movies tell us to behave during a pandemic. We try to keep it light, so it's not too serious for you. Check that out on your preferred podcast provider. Until next week, this has been Jay Shear, and I hope you have fun streaming movies at home.
Hello, welcome back, and thank you, Story Geek, for giving us our segment. We can't wait for your next installment. So now we're going into Dark Shadows Out of the Shadows, where we talk to Tom Diamond, where he talks about all the trivia behind these episodes and what are the bloopers and everything in between. So
and
take
he's
it
got
away,
them
Tom.
all, I have to say.
Yeah, and I got a whole bunch of those, but let me just get to some housekeeping first. First of all, today is Jerry Lacey's birthday. Jerry Lacey, for the newbies in the podcast, was an actor who is an actor, I should say. He's still alive and kicking. And Jerry Lacey later on, maybe in another 6 or 7 months, will come into Dark Shadows with a very famous character by the name of Reverend Trask, and we would not get too much.
Oh my God, is that him? Oh my God, that's so cool.
That is
I was actually thinking about him the other day ago. He was kind of sexy in a weird sort of way. When he was the lawyer, though.
Tony Peterson.
Yeah.
And that is actually, I think of him more as Reverend Trask because Tony Peterson, of course, we're going to talk about him later, was his first role. And that was more of a Bogart kind of character as a lawyer. And Jerry Lacey has this tremendous imitation of Humphrey Bogart.
He has a presence.
Physically like him.
He does.
He doesn't. A marvelous presence. And in fact, Jerry Lacey was in the movie Play It Again, Sam, with Woody Allen as the Humphrey Bogart ghost that haunts him. It's a great movie if you've never seen it. So happy birthday, Jerry! And next, the John Carlin Memorial, which was going to be held in April, has been postponed till late summer because of the coronavirus.
How sad.
We're going to have more information on that. Yeah, we're going to have more information on that as soon when we can. There are plans, interestingly enough, and this comes from Kathy Reshin's Shadowgram. Thank you, Kathy. There are plans in the fall for a 50th anniversary House of Dark Shadows event. This apparently is the 50th anniversary of the year that the movie was released. I guess it was back in 1970, and there will be a new print of the movie shown, and there will be guest stars from Dark Shadows. I do not know whether it's a day event or a weekend. We'll have more information for you on that. Okay, so that being said, let us go now to the new and recurring stars in this episode block. Richard Woods, who made an appearance as Dr. Woodard in the last block, a rather lackluster one, will return once more in episode 229. And that'll be it for Mr. Woods. He is, however, replaced by Robert Geringer, Dr. Woodard #2, and starting in episode 231.
I have to ask really
Robert
quick.
Geringer,
You guys
really,
like Dr. Woodard 1 or 2? I like the first one better.
Okay, I like the second one better. Of course, everybody has a right. We should discuss that, by the way. But anyway, Robert Geringer was. I said it in the prior block. He's like the Dr. Kildare of the show because of the bedside manner. He was in The Exorcist, The Way We Were, The Sentinel, or the King of the Gypsies, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, Black Like Me, Hide in Plain Sight, and he was also in the old soap opera The Doctors back in the 60s. Robert Geringer, interestingly enough, died in Maine when he passed away. So so that is the big one of the big additions. Dory Kavanaugh. This is very interesting. Dory Kavanaugh went on to be, I think, Kathy in One Life to Live. And do you remember Kathy in One Life? Was it
I'm
Karen?
trying to remember because I used to love One Life to Live. I'm trying to place her character.
Was she Karen Wallach?
Oh yes! Oh my God! Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
She
Well,
got
that's Dory
like quite a few
Kavanaugh.
awards actually for being. Well, she was a hooker or something, and that's why she. Yeah, and she got a whole bunch of good awards for that because she actually. I don't know. She played it out really good.
She was also
I
on.
remember actually
Ryan's.
watching her
Go
get
ahead.
an Emmy because Susan Lucci was up for that Impossible Emmy at that time, and she got it before she did. And I don't know how many years it took Susan Lucci to get her Emmy, but she finally did.
Well, what do you know? So it's a small world. And she was also on Ryan's Hope. I think her character was Wanda, but I'm not.
Yeah. Oh my God, Ryan's Hope. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah. So she was there too. So, and Dory Kavanaugh, in this particular block, she is the stand-in for Catherine Leigh Scott as Maggie turned Josette. And she occurs in a number of episodes. But I should also say that she goes on, and I don't want to give too much her, but since you are now, Vicky, into the 1795 storyline, which we will go into much later, Dory Kavanaugh played a character by the name of Phyllis Wick. And Phyllis Wick was the gal in the seance that was the original.
She doesn't get a whole lot of recognition for that, though, does she?
No. Well, what she doesn't get a lot of recognition for actually is what she does in this block. What the fans usually know that she had that one day stint as the Phyllis Wick character much later on when the seance is held. But she is here on episodes 224, 225/226. Apparently there was a preemption, and so it was listed as that. It's one episode, 238 and 240. Dory Kavanaugh passed away in 1983 in December in West Germany.
That's sad.
And I'm going to get more into what she did because it was very, very interesting what she did as a stand-in, especially the first time she appeared. Yes, Frances Helm played the nurse, the one-day nurse, Dr. Woodard's hospital assistant. She was on for 2 days, 235 and 236. Mary Frances Helm was her real name. She was actually married to Brian Keith from Family Affair.
Oh, no way.
Oh
my God, don't even put that song in my head.
She was the second husband of, he was the second husband. Not she was the second husband.
How does everybody get 2 and 3 husbands? I only had one.
Well, Bela
kind of trying to figure that out.
Wives. Dracula had three wives, so
this is true.
But she had 2 husbands. So, and she passed away on December 30th of 2006. Dana Elcar comes back to regale us as Sheriff Patterson in 2 episodes, which is kind of nice. The Blue Whale extras, Bob McConnell and George McCoy, are once again seen in episodes.
I have to interject one thing, though. Have you guys not noticed that the Blue Whale still has the same music?
What? Oh, the Blue Whale music?
When are they going to change that shit?
Well, but the problem is when they do change it, it's to elevator music, and that's a good point. I mean, I kind of prefer da 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 da.
Okay, well that was okay too, but
when you're talking
pop in my head,
and I'll be with you always. What is it?
See, it's not just me. See.
What gets me is when they tried to dance.
Jonathan,
that's worse.
What's that?
I said the worst is when they tried to dance to it, which is even worse.
When they tried to dance to it.
I feel sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that isn't looking too inevitable either.
And do you know?
Especially when Carolyn's trying to shimmy her way through the elevator music.
That's funny. And do you know there's one of the episodes, and these are these 2 extras walking out, and I have no idea, but there's a short blonde gal walking out. She's walking out with some guy during a Blue Whale scene, and For the life of me, it looks like Diana Malay.
Okay.
I may be completely wrong. You know what I'm talking about, Vicky?
I know what you're talking about.
I may be completely...
I thought that too, and I was trying to figure that out, and I go, I'm overthinking this, so they were extras, you know. That's what I was thinking.
I may be completely wrong, but she sure looked like Diana Malay, and she looked very happy, so I don't know whether it was because she was off the show or not. Okay. So, and one more. Here's a real trivial thing. You remember the episode where Vicky and Maggie see the shadow of Barnabas during a thunderstorm in Maggie's house, and they open the doors, the French doors.
Oh, yeah, okay. She's in the bedroom, and she's got the double doors.
Yep. Well, here's a real trivia. This is going to get you on the subway back in New York with whatever the token is now. That was played by an actor named Alfred DeLay. Uncredited. I have to give. I want to give one of the websites out there a little credit because they came up with some interesting stuff. DarkShadowsEveryday.com that's one word, and it goes about and it talks about brief synopsises of the episodes, starting with episode 210, which is when Barnabas first appears, because the person involved felt that the person who created the podcast felt that the website. The person who created the website felt that was where things were coming from. Anyway, so that comes from DarkShadowsEveryday.com. Okay, the bloopers. I have to tell you for the first time, I counted over 40 of them. There are more. I want to say in terms of a backstory that there was an AFTRA strike going on at that time in April of 1967. So apparently and once again, thank you, DarkShadowsEveryday.com, for this information. So apparently the newscasters weren't getting enough money. So everybody went on strike. The cast and crew of Dark Shadows, in sympathy, or at least the actors took off in sympathy for the newscasters. Therefore, the show was shut down, and it was shut down for a week and a half. But when they went, which is a nice vacation for them. But when they went back, they had to work 6 days a week for 10 weeks, and then they shot episodes out of sequence. So I think because of that, there were a lot more gaffes and bloopers than there usually were. So I'm just going to go over.
I noticed that most of the gaffes and stuff like that, they were always the boom. Yeah. I mean, they did not hide that microphone at all. But I mean, it's so endearing.
Well, that's always, yeah. Oh, absolutely, that's always present. But what you're going to see more in this block, there are a few of those. But what you're going to see more in this block are the actors stumbling over their lines, and there are a good many of them. But we'll get to that. So
it has to be Barnabas.
Bear with me, guys. Yes, he did do a couple. Yeah.
Well, that's Keith's favorite thing. So Barnabas always stumbles over his lines. Right, Keith?
No.
Keith,
what do you mean no?
Wake up, Keith.
If I die tomorrow, Easter will be moved because I am perfect like the Messiah.
But you'll come back. You will come back, Keith. You will. I command you. All right, anyway. So let's get to some of these things. So in episode 220, and Amazon Prime picked this up, the clock chimes twice for 7:30, but then when 7:45 comes along, it chimes once. If it's that kind of clock, the clock should chime at least 3 times. Okay, so, okay. Then episode 222. Okay, when Willie opens the doors to the old house, now, of course, you're supposed to see a sky, but what that actually is a backdrop representing the sky. And the way the camera angle saw it, that when you open the doors, you actually see there was like a kind of a partition that separated the first half of the backdrop to the second half of the backdrop. So you actually see this line separating the two. You're separating the two. And I don't think skies have lines like that. Okay, so we also now in episode 222, we also noticed that the mirror next to the door of Maggie's cottage has now been replaced by a picture, which was probably a good decision by the technical staff, because that original mirror was showing the Klieg lights when you looked at them in earlier episodes. It was giving them problems. And then for a while, they replaced that with an opaque. It looked like a mirror, but it was really an opaque surface. Well, they finally got around to it and replaced it with a picture. Also, a whole bunch of ones in episode 222, when Sam starts to sketch a painting of Barnabas, and he steps away to get a candlestick to get more light. He brings it back.
How was Sam even making any money at this point?
Only the $1,000 that Barnabas promised.
I'm just wondering.
I think he's
which will keep him.
He's what?
I think he gets the government.
Tell the American.
I think he gets the American welfare system.
That's what I was going to say. Tell the Americans what the dole is. Is that welfare or is that unemployment?
It's welfare.
Is that unemployment?
The dole is welfare.
It's welfare. Yeah. Okay, great.
So Sam's on welfare?
Sam,
I didn't know that.
I would assume so. Or Maggie is the breadwinner. One of the
She works at a diner. Okay, what could she have been actually making back then? Because I used to work in diners, and if I was lucky, I made $2.35 an hour.
Well, consider there's never anyone in there. She's lucky if she comes home with $1.
No, there's not. Have you ever noticed that? There is absolutely nobody in that diner. I mean, there is no business. Sorry, Tom. We digress.
Well, that's because Dan Curtis is too tight to hire a bunch of extras. Sorry, Tom. We probably should get back.
Do you ever think of what kind of health insurance? You ever think of what kind of health insurance Sam might? He's probably on Maggie's health insurance since she's working at the diner. If they have health insurance, otherwise maybe he's a member of but they didn't have the freelancers union back then. No. So who knows how?
Okay,
Sam
so do you want to talk about her blonde wig first when she was Maggie in the diner?
No, that had to do so they can differentiate the characters. That's why the blonde wig. They needed to differentiate.
But it was still her, though.
No, but they had to differentiate. No, it's because you got to remember it's black and white television, and when you're introducing characters, they gave her the blonde wig to differentiate her from Victoria because they didn't want to.
Well, that's interesting, but still, don't you think that you could differentiate between a brunette?
No, they did the same thing. Let's say with Buffy, when Buffy first started, because she had dark hair and Cordelia had dark hair. That's when they started dyeing Buffy's hair blonde, and they made her a blonde because that way, when you're until you get to know the characters, all you're seeing is this, and so it's a good way to differentiate the characters.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Exactly. So anyway,
sorry, Tom, we keep you
about this portrait stuff. That's. Thank you, everybody. Anyway, so Sam is one of the things when Sam is painting Barnabas, you would expect he's.
Why would he even do it? Why would anybody want to go up there at midnight and paint his fucking portrait?
Oh, because Fred wanted him to. Because Barnabas said, "I can't see you during the day."
Okay, so
he originally wanted to come in the morning.
That's like the naked line.
So then he says to him, "I want this done as soon as possible. Can you paint all night?" And I guess I could do that.
Okay, well, I can buy that.
I'll do anything. That kind of thing. So, but what I was going to point out is that number one, the canvas. You can see right through the canvas. It makes you wonder whether it's a real canvas or whether it's just gauze. But you can see what's holding the canvas up. And the other thing is that if a painter should be painting behind so that he can get the light. But apparently where he is, the light is hitting him instead of the light being behind him.
Well,
but these are all things that
Barnabas at this point.
But anyway, these are things. But I really thought the fact that he starts to sketch, then he gets a candlestick, then we see the canvas, and the canvas is still blank. So where did all the? So he's pretending to sketch. Okay. Let's see. In episode 223,
Thomas.
in episode 223, the mic is on the wall behind Liz while we're talking to Vicky. You're going to see a number of actors, a number of gaffes where the actors are tripping their lines up. And Liz says, if Mrs. Johnson, then tell Mrs. Johnson I'll give her the menu for dinner when I get home. So she mixes the words up there. In episode 223, the boom shadow of the mic is on the painting while Willie and David are talking near the old house staircase. Joan Bennett, once again in 223, gives another gaffe. I think this is probably the photograph that will be hanging here from now on. She should have said the painting that will be hanging here from now on. Okay, in episode 223, when David opens the old house door, you see that backdrop that's supposed to be the sky, but this time you see the rolled bottom of the backdrop on the floor. Apparently the backdrop was too big, and they didn't want to cut it so they would meet the floor. So they just rolled it on. It looks like It looks like if somebody's painting, and they put drapes over the walls. So that's what you see. Also in episode 223, the teleprompter is briefly seen on the window of the old house. They
do that a lot. Do you think back then that they just didn't really, I have to ask though, because people are so conscientious about it right now, and that you never saw those kind of things happening when you were watching a show. So were they just, being lackadaisy or what?
I think it was. I think that, remember that Curtis never expected this thing to ever be shown again, although he did keep.
So you think that they thought this was a one-shot thing, and they didn't think that anybody lasso onto it? Okay.
Well, especially then, because
how could they have known it was going to be?
Remember, Barnabas was only supposed to last 6 weeks. So, and the series was in danger of canceling. So they really were not prepared for what happened after when the Barnabas character came on. And incidentally, in the original scenario, Dr. Woodard was supposed to finally analyze the blood slides that he ordered from Maggie, which took as much time as the autopsy to get out. And so he would analyze that, realize what was going on, convince the townspeople, and they'd all come with stakes and torches to Barnabas and finish him off. And that was how it was originally supposed to be done.
What was actually going to happen. And then people decided he was such an endearing character, we couldn't let go of Barnabas.
Well, I think we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because because we are still in the midst of, we don't know what's going to happen to Barnabas before he becomes the end.
Well, everybody knows what's going to happen to Barnabas.
Yeah, but I do want to point out that they were considering killing the character off. I heard somewhere that it was supposed to be 2 weeks at one point, and then it became 6 weeks when they realized what was picking, and then finally they realized what they had, and so they. So he had like
a 3 week whatever.
It was supposed to be. I think originally it was 2 weeks, and then they made it 6 weeks. Because
I actually didn't know that.
He was supposed to be killed off after this. Yeah, and so that was the story there.
I'm sure a lot of people don't know.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, in the credits of episode 223, if you people, it's interesting to look at the credits because you will see stuff like if there was a shadow of a crew member or an actor standing in the door adjacent to the fireplace in the old house. And you can see a shadow of somebody stepping in that door, and then and is there for a little bit while the credits are rolling, and then that shadow disappears. So the
Yeah, they,
whoever
that
must have
time
told
started
stepped
intermittently
away.
going back and forth between houses. I can't remember.
That's for sure. All right. So let's see. There's the in episode 224. There is a mic boom on the Shadow of the Old House column. Joan Bennett, instead of saying immediately, says obediently, which is extremely trivial. Also very, very interesting in 224, and this also comes from Thank You, Dark Shadows Every Day, but they picked it up from Jim Pearson, the Grand Master of the Dark Shadows fandom, who, when he was just a fan in 1988, wrote a monograph on this. And you'll recall in that episode when Jason comes to see Willie at the old house, and Jason says, "Are you doing light housekeeping?" And the lady of the house, what's that?
Willie totally disappears.
Oh,
he's just gone.
Yeah. Well, okay. So he calls Willie the lady of the house, and you're doing light housekeeping. Well, they got a hold of a standards and practice note at the time. Those were the censors that kept in touch with Dark Shadows. And this note said, please ensure that Jason's wisecracks to Willie about his the lady in the house and light housekeeping do not in any way reveal any suspicions Jason might have that Barnabas and Willie are having a sexual relationship. So
what? What?
Yeah, Vicky woke up when I said that. When I said that, the censors,
toilet paper on that one.
The censors were concerned, and it was a Bernadette, I forget her last name, but the censors were concerned that Jason's comments to Willie about him doing light housekeeping and him being the lady of the house might have a sexual reference to Barnabas and Willie having a sexual relationship. Where Willie was
the only thing I can honestly think that there would be anything sexual is when he bit him on the hand, and he didn't bite him on the neck because back then you didn't bite men on the neck.
Well, that's right. But they were very, very.
Wow,
they
you
were
got
worried.
my attention.
I'm glad because you were like, "What the hell is he doing?"
Yeah, I didn't know what the fuck
All right.
you were talking about.
So
good.
Yeah, I'm glad. Keith, do you know what I'm talking about? Keith, wake up. Hi, Keith.
Yeah, Keith,
here.
wake up. Has he even said anything in the last half hour?
Well, that's because I'm listening to what's saying. And besides, I don't need to say anything because Vicky's talking. Because Vicky's in another century, literally, with Dark Shadows.
I am not. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm a couple episodes in.
All right. Okay, so let me continue through this as fast as I can, guys. Okay, so episode 225 to 226. So Amazon Prime has, in this particular episode, they have Jonathan calling Burke Stefan. I remember that happening, but I don't know. But for some reason, I don't remember picking this up in that episode. I might have been half asleep when I saw it because I was up till 5 a.m. yesterday catching up on all this stuff. But I did want to mention it. And also in episode 225, 226, there's a mic boom on Bob McConnell. I did say that Bob McConnell and George McCoy were the Blue Whale extras, and there was a mic boom on Bob McConnell's face, the bartender. And then, also in episode 225, 226, so Barnabas and Burke are in the Blue Whale and they're talking. And Mitch Ryan, who played Burke, missed his cue. He was supposed to say Barnabas Collins. So they were waiting as the scene started, and then Barnabas said Mr. Devlin. And at that point, Mitch Ryan realized this and said Barnabas Collins at the same time. The famous blooper of this episode is when Barnabas attacked Maggie for the first time by paying her a nightly visit in Maggie's room. And he opened the door, and you see that he smiles. And Jonathan admits this. He put his fangs in upside down. So so the first thing, when he comes in the room, you see him chewing his teeth as he realized that he put them in the wrong way. And then he goes to buy, and he's supposed to smile at her. And if you have a very big screen, you look very closely, you see
put that on my TV right now because now I have to see that.
Aha! I got you. I got your attention. I'm glad, Vicky. So now you have to have a big TV, but you can see the fangs on the bottom of his teeth rather than the top of his teeth.
Well, I know they turned around, they shoved him in, and they did this and that.
Yes. Suffice it to say, the next episode he put him in right. They did a repeat of that. Okay. Okay. You were talking about Jonathan Fritz stumbling over his lines in episode 227. While the camera shadow is on Fred to boot, he says, "I like you. I understand that I understand you." When he says that, I understand you. Also, the bite marks. The first time you see Maggie's bite marks when she isn't wearing the scarf, it looks like she got a big hickey. They straightened that out in the second one. Then you see just the precise fang marks. But at that point, the first time they saw him, it looked like Joe and she had been doing something. Also, episode 228, Liz says what they think it makes no difference to me. So she gasps there. In 228, camera on Vicky's chest, pointing to Liz while she's speaking to Liz in the drawing room. While this is an interesting one. While Carolyn is looking for the key to the basement room, the camera first the camera's focusing on her, then all of a sudden it cuts to the view of the room for at least 5 or 6 seconds, and then it focuses back to her again. I think they were getting this adjusted because this was the shot that they actually used in the credits, the general view, so they were adjusting for that. Episode 229. Now, my question here is, and Keith, maybe you can address this. Yeah. How can Woodard diagnose a loss of blood from a house call? Aside from the fact that
you would actually need to send a blood sample to the lab, and you would need to look at her HBs, WBCs, which is hemoglobins and white blood cells.
The H and H.
You could have a suspicion of it due to being a bit listless, and from her overall way that she's has no energy. But you would think that might be down to lack of iron or vitamin B.
Correct.
And so you would normally just prescribe that, and before you thought of a loss of blood. But then again, if you send it off to the lab, it'd probably take about 7 days in those days. So
well, it sure took a long time, so maybe they were off. But I was thinking, don't you also have to have symptoms of vomiting? Symptoms of diarrhea?
You normally get if there is a lack of blood or there's a problem with your platelet count, you do tend to get vertical and stuff like this. And it's the vertical that would actually make you nauseous. So
she had none of that. And my point is that this was a presumptive diagnosis. Had to be correct. Presumptive diagnosis. The writers didn't know any better, so they just put it in. So, and then also in 229, there's we talked about that already. That's the Diana Malay, the one in the blue whale. The woman walked by and she looked like Diana Malay. Now, also in 231, there's another transfusion based on Joe's statement to Woodard, the subtype. Is that proper medicine?
No, not again.
That's right.
I believe they probably didn't have a medical technician on the writing staff, or
Exactly.
I don't think the ER team that was helping write those scripts was available for Dark Shadows.
You got to do a cross match and type, and that's done in a hospital, as everybody knows. And so that again, it was an emergency. We took it. It was a good thing Joe was telling the truth. Otherwise, she could have been killed right there. Okay. In episode 232, one of Scott's rare voice bloopers, she calls Dr. Woodard Dr. Woodward. You can't necessarily blame her. I think in the remake of Dark Shadows in 1991, Barbara Steele, who played Julia Hoffman, for the veteran fans and maybe the other newbies who've actually seen that, she called him Dr. Woodard. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. In episode 233, and you have a wonderful monologue which with Jonathan is talking about the death of Josette on Bill and Carol, and he's telling a campfire story, literally to Carolyn and Vicky, while there's a big thunderstorm and all the lights are out, and the line is lips. He's talking about Josette's lover, and that's him. His lips were pressed to her throat. Vicky or Carolyn never questioned him on what that meant. I mean, right away, that's for us. But but they don't know that he's a vampire, and yet they never said anything about that kind of thing. Maggie's in episode 5, Maggie's neck bandage is falling off, and it's amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I have to admit,
that was so
one? Fucking obvious. It wasn't even funny.
Yeah, well, it was and it wasn't. And then in the next episode, they had the bandage on that. But it's amazing that the nurse is there and they don't even fix it. Which would have been the first. Which would have been the first thing. Also, in episode 235, again, you have to be looking at the Amazon, and I'm talking about Amazon Prime. You have to be looking at their captioning, and they give a line that Burke said to Joe. It's they're our sponsor and we love them, but we objected. Okay, let's see. And in 236, we have a voice gaff by Bob Geringer as Dr. Woodard, and that room nurse left open, just a crack that is wide open. That's the window nurse open, and he says it's the room that the nurse opened. Okay. Mike Boom Shadows Abound. Dana Elcar in episode 237 hits the door on the way to Collinwood. God, there are so many of them. Let me just go through some. Frid stumbles on the word portrait in 239. A crew coughs while Frid is wooing Maggie during a crew member coughs, and you can hear it, which is and then of course Jonathan gives the origin that Josette first came over here not speaking English, and he taught her French, and he taught her English because she spoke French, and that of course is not see later on when Josette's origins are actually explored. When in episode 240, Dory Kavanaugh was playing, as I said, Maggie's stand-in as Josette. And you can clearly see as she goes down the stairs to meet David. It was the last scene of the show, and you can see Dory Kavanaugh's face. If you through the veil, it was through a wedding veil, but you can see the face if you have a big TV. David, in one of his rare bloopers, and we're getting to the end of this, friends. David, in one of his rare bloopers, happy, then much happier. The big blooper, famous blooper, Burke to Woodard, when when you examine it under the microphone, meaning the lights, instead of saying microscope, he said microphone. And there are more, but I think a pretty good example of the world, with the exception of there is one more. In one episode, the first time Julia Hoffman is mentioned as Hoffman, and that's in one of the later episodes.
Is she actually, though, I have to ask, though.
Yes.
Is one of her episodes where she's like smokes a cigarette and just like a bitch, just lights it off of another candle?
Lights what?
Well,
cigarette off another candle?
Well, we actually don't see her yet. She doesn't appear yet.
We're not going to see her for a long time.
Okay. Keith, I'm so glad you can keep all the episodes. I can't.
I know. And I have a full-time job.
I'm just going to say that during this episode, they're rolling about when they refer to Hoffman, between Burke and. The reason for that is that they originally envisioned the Hoffman character as being not a woman. And that name, and the man's name was going to be Julius Hoffman. And they changed that when Grayson Hall, who later, and we'll talk about her later, one of the big stalwart, one of the stalwart actresses of the show, playing Julia Hoffman, relationship with Barnabas, which was one of the tearjerkers of the show, came to that. In that particular episode, when it was first mentioned, they were thinking of putting the role on as Julius. I will another perhaps podcast go into some Julius. I will in another podcast some of these into some other of these bloopers. Suffice it to say, we'd be here for at least 2 hours. So with that, I am now going to shut my mouth and give guys. Oh, okay. Wait a minute! I got to do something else. I got to talk about now. I got to talk about the show.
Okay, what show are we talking about, Tom?
Or do I? Wait a minute. Do I talk about the show now?
What show are we talking about?
That's a great question. The Dark Shadows.
Well, what we're doing at the moment is we're going to cut to our news program about Collinsport. So this is our Into the Shadows, and here's the news from Vicky Ray.
220 to 243.
This is Keishago filling in for Vicky Ray with the Collinswood News. After much discussion in the current state of the old house, Elizabeth's daughter agrees that Barnabas can move in, along with his new mate and manservant Willie. Whilst Willie does the grunt work, Barnabas decides a late-night treat is in need and makes a call to the Collinsport Inn, where he meets Maggie Evans doing a late shift. How late this cafe opens is anyone's guess, because we have witnessed her closing it down when the sun is up, and other times when she looks like she's doing the graveyard shift. Sorry, I digress. Barnabas leaves and starts leering at Maggie like a demonic peeping Tom, which causes Maggie's nerves to be on edge. Barnabas then makes a house call to Sam to commission his portrait, which can only be done by candlelight. Sam points out that natural light would make a better portrait, but Barnabas throws more cash his way and he relents to do the painting. Elizabeth finds out that Willie is working for Barnabas, much to her annoyance, and David cannot seem to get away from the old house, sneaking in and only being chased away time and time again. Nighttime falls again on the inhabitants of Collinswood, who have the weirdest sleeping hours known to man. Maggie has a nightmare where she sees herself dead in a coffin, where she dances around the tree twice to fill in the time. She wakes up screaming, which causes Sam to shrug it off, but he is still concerned. Now this is where things get weird. Does Maggie get dressed and go to the Blue Whale, or does a whole day pass? We shall never know. This is the world of Dark Shadows. Barnabas pays off Sam with a drink, and Maggie feels strange when he shows up at the Blue Whale. The product of polite society seems to ask Jay that he will take her home after removing himself from the table amicably. Later, peeping Tom Barnabas leers at Maggie while she is asleep. Maggie wakes up lethargic and unable to hold a cup of coffee or even a cup. She is dazed and bewildered, and Joe becomes concerned. Meanwhile, Sam is painting Barnabas by candlelight. This is where it gets really strange, because actually Barnabas does not need to sit for this portrait because they are repainting the portrait in the main house foyer. Anyway, Sam decides he needs to get the colors just right, and Barnabas sneaks off to do some leering and feeding. Meanwhile, at the main house, the locked basement door becomes of interest yet once again for the first time in 18 years. Carolyn starts to think that maybe there's something of her father's in the room. Elizabeth gives her an affirmative no, and this seems to drop off Widow's Hill for the time being. Due to Maggie's lack of energy and plot stolen from Bram Stoker's Dracula, Sam calls Dr. Woodward, who explains about blood loss. It seems this is a regular occurrence, or Woodward has amnesia, because there seems to be no connection to Willie suffering the same fate previously. He starts to give her infusions. Maggie becomes obsessed with open windows, and as a nurse makes a phone call, Maggie slips out into the night, much to everyone's horror. While Willie, knowing that Willie is up to no good and has now had a new heart, thanks to the new face that old Willie didn't have, makes an anonymous phone call to Victoria, telling them that Maggie is tiptoeing through the graveyard. Joe and Victoria find Maggie and drag her back, though no one seems to question how she got there, and Barnabas meets Willie for being a little tattletale. Woodward orders a blood transfusion for Maggie, while Sam keeps watch over her and forbids her to roam the streets at night. Sam goes off to paint Barnabas again and leaves Joe and Victoria to watch over Maggie. Maggie becomes bipolar and breaks up with Joe, whilst Victoria tries to be the voice of reason for Joe and to give Maggie's psychotic breakdown a break. Victoria watches over the passive-aggressive Maggie until dawn breaks. The next evening, during a routine thunderstorm, Barnabas tells Victoria and Carolyn the story of Josette Collins' death. While the writers remembered the sad little tale was anyone's guess, but hang on there, folks. We will be getting there in a few more months. Victoria ends up back at Maggie's house, and Maggie's once good nature has turned sour and orders her to leave. Victoria phones for help, while the same dog howls in the same manner, which makes you wonder why no one has shot the dog or sent it to some kind of obedience school. Finally, Maggie is taken to the hospital, which then appears to die. Nurse takes a phone call, and she's just gone, even though Dr. Woodward told her not to open the window, which she does, and leaves her alone, which she does. We have now witnessed the worst nurse in television history. Barnabas has swooped Maggie to the old house. How did he get her there? Was he a bat and then took Maggie in his little bat feet and flew her there? Did they hitchhike? Did they walk? Anyone's guess. Anywho, he tells her that she will become his long-lost love, Josette, which is handy considering that Maggie looks like Josette, and she normally plays the ghost for all of you trivia hounds out there in Dark Shadows land. Dr. Woodward, being a half-empty type of guy, believes that Maggie is dead, though how a dead body just disappears doesn't seem to be of any mind, of course. This is 1 year before Night of the Living Dead is released, so zombieism probably is not imprinted on their frontal lobes. Jason is wandering in the woods. You remember him? Well, apparently he's still around, walking through woods at night with that same dog howling in the background, though I have to admit that dog is currently consistent with the tone, volume, and musicality of his howling. Obviously, Dan could only afford the one track of the dog howling. He tells Willie that he knows he is up to some game. Willie tells him to leave, and Jason is trying to figure out the scheme to disappear into another plot line for a later date. Caroline and Victoria visit the old house and walk in like they own the place and start touching and feeling everything. Apparently the coronavirus is not a problem, as they have touched and more touch every single surface that is found in this room. Willie tells them they must leave, and of course Barnabas shows up and is cordial to the girls, but tells Willie off for not being a cordial host. Millie comes out of her cosplay outfit, walking around like Josette and taking on Josette's inner being without the French accent. Maggie starts to believe she is Josette, and Willie hides her upstairs in the Josette suite newly decorated by Willie. I don't know, but if Willie is good with his hands, as we're definitely seeing, he's definitely in the wrong career. Sam and Joe appear, and is almost a close call for them to discover Maggie. Barnabas does believe that Willie should have a better control of Maggie, and seems that Barnabas doesn't like to get his hands dirty. David breaks in and enters the old house once again, which Barnabas takes him back to Collinswood. Roger does his fatherly bit, which is probably the most ineffectual display of parenting that we shall see thus far. Barnabas gives father advice to Roger. David sneaks out of the house and runs to the old house, and he sees Maggie. David believes that Maggie is Josette's ghost, which makes sense, I guess. Maggie calls out to David. Barnabas tells David to stop coming around, and David leaves holding on that his best friend Josette's ghost is dead and well. David needs to get some human friends. Dr. Woodward finds out that something is amiss with Maggie's cells, which he looks at otherworldly things. Then his office gets ransacked and rummaged and stolen. A note to the wise: you might not want to advertise if you think something is afoot. Just saying, not judging. Dr. Woodward then decides to check Willie's blood, whilst Jason informs Elizabeth that there is going to be a shotgun wedding and Elizabeth is going to be the bride. Hee-haw! If Elizabeth don't agree, he's going to sing like a canary and tell everyone that she murdered her long-missing husband, Paul Stoddard, whose body is, or is not, sleeping away behind the closed door in the basement. And if that is the case, it can only mean one thing. Due to loss of smell, every person in Collingwood may have the coronavirus. Tune in next month for much more news from the Collinswood world of Dark Shadows. So, Tom, what do you think of the episodes of Dark Shadows from episodes 222 to 243?
Well, I think you can see that in this particular block, they're going down to literally a recapping to a certain extent of the Dracula. Dr. Woodward is Van Helsing. Maggie, I haven't figured out if she was Stenra or Nina. Willie is Renfield. Barnabas is Dracula, and you don't see a Dr. Seward or anything. Maybe Julia, I should say the Hoffman character would have been the Dr. Seward if they had look at it. But to that extent, there are a few poignant highlights, and if you can get through all the bloopers. I want to discuss, which I thought was very interesting, was Dory Kavanaugh, and she was again the stand-in, and we're talking about the dream here that Maggie has, which is really atmospheric, where she dreams she's in a Twilight Zone kind of. I'm actually reminded of the Twilight Zone episode of the little kid who through the wall, who falls through the wall in her bedroom and falls into an alternate dimension. You remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Vicky? Yeah. And that's what that kind of reminded me of. But anyway, she goes ahead and she sees herself in the coffin and see a skeleton. She's looking, and all of a sudden her face turns into face looking down at the coffin. So I don't know we ever discovered, but between scenes in Dark Shadows, because of the way it was set up, the actors ran to the next scene while people were while other actors were keeping it busy, or they inserted film stuff while the actors were running to the next scene. And in this particular case, to have Catherine Leigh Scott, who was in bed. The dream was starting. You see the camera with the wave line and everything. And she had to run to the other set. So what they did, they had Dory Kavanaugh with her back to the bed. And they filmed that, and then they stuck that in. You're going to see one scene where Maggie is tossing and turning, and then you're going to see where her back is to the camera. And that was actually Dory Kavanaugh. And that gave Catherine time to run to the other set and assume her position. She acted out, but then once again, she had to be in the next scene, so did film her in the coffin. I think that may have also been a film scene in advance. That was Scott. And then that's Dory Kavanaugh putting the skeleton mask on while runs back to the bed and wakes up screaming. they needed time for Maggie going back from the dream set to the reality set. That's why they focused on Dory Kavanaugh with the mask over her, with the mask over her head. So I think that was very, very interesting in terms of nowadays they handle that very easily, but it was very interesting the way they handled that. Roger does an interval when he does; he's great. There's a little talk I think with David that reminds you of the older times when they were really friendly with each other, and I think. Of course, the main thing in this is Jonathan kidnapping Maggie, the makeup that Jonathan has when they make a vampire out and they give him horrible makeup, and also when Maggie's under the influence.
It was
incidentally Maggie,
and it just went on and on and on though.
I have to say that I did quite like that they tried to match Maggie and Barnabas' makeup together at one point. They had like the same eyeliner on, the same eye makeup on. It's like, oh, okay.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I mean, there's one scene where basically, where the Barnabas and Maggie are together, where he actually does the initial, where he takes her into the graveyard sort of thing, and he's whisking her away. And then it's like, and then I looked at him, it's like, oh my God, someone obviously the same makeup artist did most of their makeup on that day, because it's probably the only time. I mean, when normally you see Barnabas peer through a window, you normally get like all of a sudden they darkened his eyes, they had like eyeshadow and everything on him.
Right.
Normally see. So obviously what happens, because he did, it starts out with him leering into the window sort of thing before he takes her away. So obviously it's like, oh, they I don't know, maybe the person doing Maggie's makeup thought maybe she was Barnabas. I'm not quite sure, but they kind of carried away. I mean, what I found quite interesting about this is that the story about Barnabas and Maggie and this whole storyline is very, very tight, and it's very, very well done. Outside of, though, that it does seem like the rest of the cast is picking up the stuttering of Barnabas. It's like they all start doing it after a while and like, okay, sort of thing, which is quite interesting. But I think that overall these episodes are very, very tight. But at the same time, we are left, we're basically a month without any Jason and Elizabeth Stoddard's story.
None at all. There's nothing
kind of
going
interesting. So when it does come back, which in our next segment it will, we will be looking at this again because it does come back, and I'm kind of wondering how viewers who are basically in the midst of this storyline, which is a very interesting storyline and it's very, very well done. I'm quite impressed.
It is.
But you do kind of wonders, like when the Jason and Elizabeth Stoddard storyline does come back, I wonder how many people were lost. Because if you're looking at when Barnabas enters Dark Shadows, and if you look at the folklore that's behind this, from as far as viewing figures, apparently as soon as Barnabas showed up, this is when the audience started growing and growing and growing. So right. I could just imagine when we do next month's episode, when we have Jace, McGuire and Elizabeth Stoddard storyline, I could just imagine everyone going, "Ugh, what's this?" So it's quite interesting. Where I think that what they might have been a bit clever doing is maybe splicing the two stories so that they're kind of going simultaneously instead of just leaving one story off. But saying that storyline is a bit boring. But I mean, the Barnabas one's a lot more interesting. But looking at it, I thought, God, if I was watching it day after day after day, 5 days a week, and after 4 weeks, I kind of would have, I mean, we're quite lucky here because we can see these in blocks for any time we want to see it, due to Amazon Prime and video and DVD,
exactly,
etc. So we can watch these grouped together, and therefore it wouldn't be. But if you look at Audience in 66, I mean, first of all, the storylines move very, very fast. So if you missed one episode, you could get lost because the storylines are kind of moving very quickly here, which for us, the viewer, nowadays, this is fantastic for us. But you do kind of wonder how regular viewers getting 1 half-hour episode a day were able to, when it all came to meshing together the Jason storyline with the Barnabas storylines and these two things running simultaneously.
Well, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. It got so bad that this is later down. So Ed Blaney, the announcer, had to actually come on and talk about and give a recap of the plot at one particular point, which was unprecedented. To have an announcer talk about what was going on, and that happened in one of the episodes. That's much further down the pipe. But you're right. I mean, one of the things this really also appealed to I think extreme people with good long-term memories and short-term memories, because they were able to I think follow this more. I do want to point out, by the way, in terms of the Liz and Jason. It certainly takes a backseat to the Barnabas and Josette thing. I'm kind of glad it did. The last episode that we looked at, Jason tells Liz that they're going to have to get married, and that's their latest thing. Jason has been building up to the point where he got Liz to transfer money out of a Swiss bank account in his name. This catches the attention of one of the auditors, and Roger has a big fight with Liz about it. And big scene, though, between Liz and Roger, because Liz has all along been trying to keep it from him. And Roger is going, what the heck is going on here? He goes, I know what it is, Roger says, to be blackmailed or to have to live in fear because of Roger's situation with him killing Estrian and having to live with that for years. So he says, I know what it is to hide. I think you should let me know what's going on. And finally, she says, just do me one favor. She didn't tell him what it is, but just do me one favor. Stand by me. By me. Whatever happens. And he says, I will. And I think that was a good moment. A nice moment in the particular thing. But it's obvious everybody's more interested in what's happening with Barnabas and
it's an interesting storyline. I mean, you have Maggie, who's an innocent, being preyed upon, and meanwhile no one seems to understand, which is quite interesting. I had to sit there and say, though, that nurse is supposed to watch over Maggie, and Dr. Woodward, before he leaves the room, goes, whatever you do, don't open the window and don't leave her alone.
And
what does the nurse do? She opens the window and leaves her alone. You're thinking, God, this is like the worst nurse ever.
But that's straight out of the Dracula. That's straight out of the Dracula movie. Do you remember? Well, the only thing that was missing was the garlic. That was, but it was. I think it convinces the nurse to open the window because the garlic is smelling up the place.
Yeah.
You don't have the garlic here, but you have so that's the, that particular part is.
But it did make me wonder how long that nurse was able to keep her job after that. I thought, she's fired.
Well, in fact, she
was on the unemployment line later.
Well,
more
really,
than that, remember,
they tell her
the nurse
exuberantly not to open the window, and she opened it a crack.
Yeah.
And I
And she
mean by
does.
like 2 or 3 inches. And it's
And she
just like,
does.
what are you fucking doing? Seriously, that's what I kept saying. It's like, what are you doing?
Now, this is something that I found quite interesting as
she
well.
pronounces her dead.
I mean,
She pronounces her dead.
But she wasn't dead, though.
Well, to be honest, they didn't take they took a stethoscope over her clothing, and to be honest, you wouldn't be able to hear anyone's weak heartbeat that way anyway. But anyway,
Correct.
Yeah, there's not really there's not really good medical practices taking place in Collinsport. I'm sitting there saying, if this is the medical practices they do, God knows how many people are buried alive in this town. They're seemingly dead or in a coma or something. But they did take the nurse to. They took the nurse to task over there. Well, I think it was Bert I think it was Sam. Sam ran. How could she be dead if she's missing and all that? And I don't believe the nurse. She couldn't have been dead. And Woodard has to defend her, saying, "I've worked with her for years. She's good." So that's probably why she didn't get fired. I had to sit there and say, though, the thing is, though, she's dead, but her body disappeared. So, and let's be honest, if a body disappears, it's one or two things. Either she's not dead or there's a necrophiliac running around somewhere that's actually doing unspeakable things to the dead body. But I have to sit there and say, there's some really weird. When you look at vampire lore and the chicks that go with the vampire lore, it doesn't seem that Barnabas really sticks to that outside the sunlight and the cross, which we're not quite sure. We're assuming the cross at this point because we don't have any real evidence if a cross bothers him or not. Though we do know I think there was a cross when Willie opens the casket. Isn't there a cross on his casket or something?
I don't remember that.
No.
Okay, so we don't know. So we don't know about the cross lore yet with how Barnabas is going to react to that. But we do even know sunlight. But can Barnabas eat and drink? Because there are times when he's at the Blue Whale and he does order a drink. And and so
they're not supposed to drink. They're not supposed to have coffee. Like he had with Maggie. They're not supposed to. And he's drinking.
So it's almost like Dark Shadows is making up their own lore for Barnabas. And it's not a bad thing because, if you look at things like 30 Days of Night, you look at, Bram Stoker's Dracula, or you look at other vampires, they do cut and change, and some things are okay here and they're not okay there. Like most, people put their own spin on it. But it's kind of weird that we don't really know what the laws of the lore are for Barnabas. They haven't really been established yet. So.
With the cross, and I mentioned this in the last block, where he walks through the cemetery. That cemetery is full of crosses. Mm-hmm. If he were really a traditional vampire, he wouldn't be able to survive in the goddamn cemetery.
But it's nighttime now.
He'd be turning his face.
But you have to remember, the moon shines bright in that graveyard. It's like when they're walking through. Sometimes that graveyard's better lit than the Blue Whale. So it's like, and the Blue Whale has electric light. So go figure.
And did you see? There's one scene where, and it's during the day, and he's talking to somebody. I may have been Vicky. I don't remember who, or Sam. And the wolf howls. And then all of a sudden she has it. That signals a personality change, by the way, when the wolf howls. And it was pointed out, and I agree with the Dark Shadows every day. Maggie is scared of Barnabas when she turns into a bitch, when she's telling Joe to get out of her life, and she snaps at people, and extremely. She's scarier than Barnabas when she does that.
I say that Catherine Lee Scott really does a fantastic job in these segments. We actually get to see her beyond the pathetic little, person who's worried about her dad's alcoholism. So so it's quite good to see a lot change within the Maggie character. And I say I do believe that if people who became fans of Maggie or Catherine Lee Scott has to do with the storyline here. That I think because I think that if she didn't have the storyline, I think that she pretty much gets lost in all the other storylines, sort of thing, But here, it's like you can see where she actually starts coming into her own, which I have to sit there and say she does a fantastic job here.
Well, she's an integral part, though, to every story.
Well, she's kind of an outsider looking in. So what we got into with Maggie up until this point is Maggie would comment on things that are going on. So if something happens and Laura Collins, so she's commenting on what's going on with Laura, or someone's talking to her what's going on with Laura, and then she's kind of listening. She's kind of like the agony aunt that people come and talk to. When we got about the car accident with Roger, with David, and someone would come in and tell Maggie about it. If there was, right. And as far as even the car accident that deals with her father and Roger and Laura, she's kind of just a commentary about it. She's kind of not really involved in it. The only time she's ever really involved in a storyline is one with her own, with her and Joe finally start getting together. But up until this point, she's kind of the outsider because she is the outsider. She's not a member of the Collins family. She's just basically the waitress and her only connection with any of them really was Victoria became a bit friendly with her. So we're not really quite sure how their friendship
That was all this basically happening because Victoria Winters came into town, or would these people had a normal course of life?
Well, I don't think to be honest, Barnabas is the fault of not Victoria, but it's the fault of Jason McGuire trying to fleece Elizabeth's daughter for money, bringing Willie along with them. That's how Barnabas comes
True.
through. And as far as Bert Devlin goes, I mean, Victoria is, not the thing there. They just happen to be on the same train. But if Victoria wasn't there, Burke would still go on there. Victoria is kind of like the innocent bystander, though she does try her best to be good. Sometimes she's kind of the person that always tries to be good and always tries to do the same thing, but is always slightly misunderstood and just slightly off from doing the thing that she should be doing. But then again, we do see Dark Shadows is all about seeing Dark Shadows, Collinswood through Victoria's eyes. That's what everything is. That's the reason why she does all the narrations in the beginning and everything like this. And Dark Shadows for me is like Victoria Winters telling you the story of what's going on here. So she's kind of like the narrator.
But she's clearly taking a back seat.
She does.
Narrator for a while.
And to be honest, you really can't have too many people involved with the Barnabas storyline at the moment anyway, because it's this weird erotic sexual dance going on between Maggie and Barnabas. And then you have the outsiders who are worried about Maggie. But to be honest, it's the main focus is this, this erotic dance and Barnabas being obsessed with his old love, Josette. He's turning her into that. So there's not really enough room to include anyone else in the storyline because it all hinges on these two people. And of course, and outside the naysayers or the people who want to protect or to find Maggie, they're kind of spectators to the main story, until we will get to, I imagine we will get to a point where they will need to step in. But at the moment, it's just this song and this, this, and it's all about, I guess, enticing her and, basically just alluding to her to be his, to make, this is going to be his long love. So seducing, that's the word I'm looking at. It's all about the seduction of Maggie, and Barnabas seducing her.
Well, it's funny because, at this point, Vicky's plotline is taking a backseat to Vicky, the strongest character on the show, one of the strongest. But she is, of course, you're going to hear now, I don't understand. That's coming a lot. That's coming around more now. Why? I don't understand what's wrong.
But this is pretty much her same storyline that she had during the Laura Collins, really. I don't understand. I mean, I know that she's the one that puts it together in the end there.
But it's going to come more. It's going to come out more now. It's true. It did start to happen with Laura. You still had some strength within her in terms of just dealing with everything and not leaving when everybody was most of them were trying to pressure her to leave at one point. But what I was going to say was there is one scene, and I'm blanking out in it, where that was a remnant of the old Vicky working with somebody, and I'll probably remember that for next time. But in there where she's giving somebody hell, and it's remnant of the old. When my back is against the wall, I can stand up for stuff, but. And even Barnabas at one point threatens, he looks at Vicky and says, "You're a clever girl. Make sure that what happened to Maggie doesn't happen to you."
Again,
so
don't you think that we're still like in the early episodes?
Yeah, no, but he says that even then. But what my point is that Barnabas is threatening Vicky in a way because he realized that Vicky's very smart. And of course, he's paranoid about everybody. And the favorite line that is now asserting itself in this block on Jonathan's part is, "Did I startle you? I'm sorry if I startled you." And he scares the pants off of everybody and then points to it. And so that is, so I mean, each of these have a number of these characters. The main characters have these sentinel. One is, "You betrayed me," or this trust, especially when he
he does get rather
emotional. I
will say.
Rather. Somebody pointed out, and again, I think it was every day, pointed out General Hospital right now at this particular time, you had Henry and Sharon Pinkham. I remember this very well because I watched that before I watched Dark Shadows. And they're taught, that Sharon is doing bedpans in General Hospital, Dark Shadows. Willie is getting the hell beaten out of him by Barnabas with a cane. It's a different segue from one to the other, and it's a cardinal issue. It's cardinal difference between a regular soap opera and what Dark Shadows was doing at that particular.
I have to say, I quite like the episode. I quite like Willie. It seems like I kind of like how that he's kind of proven himself, and that the characters are. I mean, Elizabeth's daughter still doesn't like Willie for various reasons, because I mean, to her, I guess Willie at this point, Willie still is associated with Jason, and Jason's a thorn in Elizabeth's side. So therefore, it's going to take a while before Willie wins the graces of Elizabeth anyway. But I like the way that the girls see. I have to sit there and say, people, if Willie must be the best builder, contractor, and decorator any man could find. I mean, this guy does really fast, good work. I mean,
better than Mrs. Johnson, I'll tell you that.
He put that whole house together like in record time.
I know. I mean, it's
I
very
think
impressive.
the two of them should have opened. I think the two of them should have business between Willie's building skills and Mrs. Johnson. Well, Mrs. Johnson, so that's another thing. So maybe I ought to take that back. But
she seemed to be missing during these segments, didn't she? Well, I just remembered she didn't. I don't remember.
No, she wasn't in this segment. Not in this segment. There's an homage, by the way, to Willie's carpentry skill, and this is going to be in. The cast got together at the Dark Shadows and did a reunion. It was broadcast. It was a script written by Amos and Selby, David Selby's son. David Selby was Quentin. We'll get into that. It was called Return to Collinwood. And this was years later, and whoever was there, the entire cast got back together. And John Carlin was once again Willie, and he was now married to somebody, but they were now living in the old house. This was 20 years later, and Willie has fixed it up. You've got internet capability, you've got all the done, you've got electric lights. This is Willie. Willie has now become a master electrician, found his niche.
The old house doesn't get electricity, does it? Because I was looking at the chandelier that's hanging. I thought, well, there's no candles in it, so does that light up? Or?
There's supposed to be candles in there.
Oh, was there? Okay, but, I didn't see any candles.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful.
No,
candle.
there are. But no, there aren't candles. So there you go. I mean, maybe the ambient light lights it up or something.
Yeah,
like
precisely.
That.
But I have to say, but I do like the change in Willie. I like how he's gone from this horrible kind of
wretched human existence to
almost raping women, and that kind of eerie horror.
I didn't really get that from this Willie though.
But this Willie is like, but this Willie's actually is like, it's almost like, and this is what I find quite interesting about Willie is that Willie is like this horrible, horrible character, and then of course we get Willie number 1. And then what we get when Willie number 2 comes in, what we get is a Willie number 2 that is now on the other side of being bullied and being used as an object for Barnabas' plaything. Basically, is what Willie is. And I like that. In order to do that, then what we do is we get a change in Willie. It's almost like Willie has an awakening that therefore, this is happening to me. This is really, really bad. And I'm going to do whatever I can. And though Willie's not the brightest tool in the box, he does the best he can do to help protect people. Simple fact that disguising his voice, saying where Maggie is. The simple fact that any one time it comes, what are you doing here? Right. What are you doing? You really need to leave. Don't you understand that you shouldn't be here? And he's always doing his best. But on the other end, though, don't you think? I mean, okay, that he's not helpless anymore, and that he's. Well, he is hopeless because at the end of the day, and this is where
he has every chance.
Well,
Not
not
many
but we
things.
don't. But what we don't understand about the Willie Barnabas situation is that when Barnabas in the previous episode bit Willie, Willie was under the command of Barnabas.
Right.
Now that they're together, we don't have a really clear understanding if Willie is still under the command of Barnabas. Can he run away?
No.
If he runs away, how far can he go? How much of a draw does Barnabas'
can he go to
supernaturalness
California?
have with Willie?
Actually, just like how far, well, can he actually leave?
I mean, because you would think that, and that's why I'm understanding that there must be this supernatural hold on Willie, because during the day it'd be very easy for Willie to get miles and miles away.
Right.
So obviously that option's not there. So obviously whatever, I guess once Barnabas bites you and you become his, whether it's with Maggie, and we're going to see what happens with the Maggie character later on in future episodes. We won't give any of that away, but we do understand from Willie's point of view that obviously that once Barnabas bites you and makes you his or makes you his property, that there is no escaping. You cannot get away from this. So
Right.
I'm assuming that's probably what it is. But I do like it that Willie does keep fighting back, but it's not fighting back to protect himself and for his own self-perseverance or self-preservation, but it's more to help other people.
Well,
And
he's
if you
mildly
notice,
disgusted, don't you think?
well, if you notice, the people that he's protecting are the people that when he first met, he was sitting there.
Hate him the most.
He was the predator of these women, but now he's trying to protect these women. And I think that's a very interesting thing to look at between the Willie character. And I quite like
Well,
what
I think
they've
it's a
done
tribute.
there.
Yeah. I think it's a tribute to Carlin. He played him the way he did because you could actually see in the first few episodes of this block how he looks and how trapped he feels. You can see the expression on his face as Barnabas, at one point Barnabas just points with his hand and says, "You know what you have to do. Go!" And he points, commandingly with his hand in the direction. And Willie slinks away. This is not the Willie that we knew that could even defend himself for himself. Jason beats the hell out of him. I felt so sorry for the character. First, Barnabas beats up on him, and then Jason beats up on him.
He totally canes him.
But you know what I also like is that even though Willie is basically a victim of his own choosing, because let's put it, if he made different decisions, he wouldn't be here. But what I like is that Willie doesn't play the victim. And that's what I quite like, because it would have been very easy to make Willie the victim of everything. Oh, woe is me, oh, woe is me. Make him like Willie the millennial sort of thing. And I quite like the idea that he's not a victim. He's like, and I like that understanding, like, I put myself in this position. There's not much I can do, but I'm going to make sure that no one else is put in this position. And that's what I quite like what the writers did with Willie here, because it would have been very easy just to make him the victim, and that's it. Just there, oh, master, or whatever they could have done, like from.
Well, it's a very interesting triumvirate. It's a very interesting triumvirate that is going to develop between this, and again, it's going ahead when Julia comes on. Kind of Spock and McCoy of Star Trek, and we'll talk about that. But Keith, I wanted to address your point that there's no electricity in the house. It is true that in this time band there was no electricity in the old house, but in a couple of years, for the new fans, we're going to go into a segment called Parallel Time, where the Dark Shadows was a parallel universe. And in that parallel universe, the old house is indeed wired up for electricity. It looks very, very different. And that's kind of, it's kind of very interesting with modern furniture. So it's it's really interesting as opposed to the end that we see in the current house.
I also quite find interesting about the old house is that I don't know what they made this house of, but the old house, God, the workmanship must have been fantastic for that house to stay uninhabited for over 150 years and not fall down whatsoever. And all the stairs seem to be safe. And I have to say, whoever built the original house did a fantastic job. So, because I know for a fact that there's this house from where I'm from in Watertown, in one of the old country roads, that basically people moved out, and after 20 years, it basically would start falling down. So, yeah, amen to the person who was the architect of the old house. So good on you.
Well, remember that speech, which was in the last block, that was one of the Sentinel monologues that Fred gives about how the old house was constructed, and the bricks came from Italy. They imported the rugs from Persia and all this kind of thing. Sets up the kind of thing that the universality, the international flavor from a number of major countries that went into the construction of this house, and it also points classical timelessness. Just like classical music is timeless, even though a lot of these pieces were done 300, 400 years ago, it's still popular today. Same thing with the old house, why it's able to survive. It's that similar feeling. That's the kind of thing that I get, the vibe that I get.
Now, what I also liked, which we'll find out how much truth is in this, because as we know, the writers tend to get a bit lost every once in a while. But I love this. I love the segment of during the thunderstorm, the lightning, the storm brewing outside, and we get Barnabas telling the story of Josette to Victoria and Carolyn, which I have to sit there and say is probably one of the best
Great monologue
that he gives. He showed there's like passion, there was horror, and it's something that Vincent Price would have been proud of. I mean, I sit there and say
I agree with that. I agree.
I
totally forgot about that, but that's an excellent.
It stands in line with the other monologue that I just talked about. This really stands as the hot block because, as I said, it's a campfire story that he's of Vicky and Carolyn, and and it gives Frid really become Shakespearean to a certain extent.
But we waited so long to hear the story, though,
What's that?
At this point, we've waited so long to hear the story. What actually happened? Why is her ghost dancing around the side of the house? If you remember in earlier episodes, you see her ghost dancing around the side of the house.
You never quite understood where Josette fit in anywhere. You just knew that she was there. I understand.
They did it, quite frankly.
She's right.
But they realize, and I think I agree, and they realize at the time when they have to get the Josette character, they have to give meaning to that character. And what better way to do that, and congratulations to Ron Sproat, Malcolm Marmestein, that they realize that this is a great way to make Josette a contrapositive or a point, to Barnabas, and also in fitting with the Dracula legend. So it also gave Catherine Lee Scott a great chance to, as we talked about before, she really came to the fore here, because they gave her a chance. They gave her a lot of range now, hero, because now she's not only playing Maggie, she's being. I don't know whether Josette has actually taken over Maggie's body, because he's got her so hypnotized, and the conversation she has with David, that you really wonder whether this is really Josette now, or is it Max again? And then of course you see that she struggles every time somebody mentions Sam's name. When she hears Sam and Burke downstairs, and she's up in that room, and she hears them talking, and then you see the.
I have to say, as a 20th century woman, 21st century, whatever, I'm really annoyed when they have women that don't scream or don't do whatever. I would be kicking balls to get downstairs, and it just annoys the shit out of me.
But we don't. That's where we don't really know what the pull of Barnabas has on her. But it does seem to be a temporary pull. So when he's asleep, does it have the same kind of pull? That's why I'm saying the rules of Barnabas are very, very.
But if you're trying to escape a situation, you're going to try to escape a situation. I know. I used to be married, and You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but to be honest, these women are not very good at escaping. I mean, look at the time Victoria was tied up by what's his name in the room, and then she goes out and she's like, taking her time getting out the front door.
Yeah, true.
I mean, it's great to bring this storyline. I mean, the only problem I have, the only thing I kind of wish that the writers and the directors pay a little bit more attention to small details. For the simple fact that if Maggie is turning into Josette, and she was going to fool Barnabas. Now the thing is that if Victoria was going to be the Josette creature sort of thing, it might have made more sense
Right.
maybe, because at least she knows about Josette having a French accent. Where if Maggie's going to be turning into Josette, you think that she would gain, or she's going to be channeling Josette, or Josette's going to be entering Maggie's body, or however the writers are thinking about this. You just think that Maggie would have a French accent as she's being Josette. Now, of course, the original Maggie running around pretending she's Josette, or whether she's not Josette, of course, she would not know this small little detail about Josette being French, which we have been told by Barnabas giving us the story, and previously the Lauren Collins storyline, where Josette entered Victoria's body and spoke with a French accent and spoke French. So,
that's right. Okay.
So
you're right.
So, and as I said before, I guess if you're watching this from a day to day, back when it first aired, and let's be honest, Dark Shadows was never supposed to ever be seen again after its original release.
That's the whole point.
Revisiting it would have been nice if they actually paid attention to small little details, because that would have been very interesting.
Well, I think they tried to do that. They tried to do that in the remake in '91. Yeah. Curtis had the chance to work on some of the stuff that they missed. And in point of fact, Josette does have a French accent in the '91 remake. So there you go. But
in future episodes,
remember, it was overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, we will get more of the Josette storyline and the Frenchness in September when we actually get to that point, but it's just quite interesting. It's just you kind of wonder, it's like, it would have been nice if they just paid a little bit of detail to little things like that, which would actually, it doesn't take away from Dark Shadows at all. It doesn't make it bad or worse. It just be like, oh, it'd been nice if they'd done that sort of thing. It's not a hard criticism or anything.
You can't go ahead and say though, you got 99, why didn't you get 100?
Yeah,
they did pretty darn well, and some, again, the writing when Barnabas says, and I love this line from this block: "Serenity, you hear the emotion. Well, you know that serenity," and he's talking to them, trying to. Serenity may be what he wants, but he doesn't have it, and he keeps acting this way. He's not going to get it. And the other thing also, I thought it was very that when he was trying to convince David that Josette was a figment of his imagination, saw Maggie as Josette, Barnabas talks to David, has a sit-down talk with him, and is talking to him about, well, this is a fantasy that you have. Not calling the kettle black. Barnabas has a fantasy about making Josette his own, but he's talking to David about the fact that he actually saw Maggie and trying to convince him the other way.
I have to sit there and say that if I was going to find fault with these episodes, the only real fault that kind of bothers me to a certain extent is when David sees Maggie as Josette and doesn't recognize Maggie. And the thing is, it would have been fine if we haven't had scenes where David's been at the cafe and he's made her a hot fudge sundae, or scenes where David's had conversations with Maggie, or if they just met in passing and where they never had any scenes together, it would probably been a bit easier. Hot fudge sundae
that was like boiling or whatever. That was
the ice cream that wasn't frozen, the melted fudge.
Yeah, and on top of that, though, when you think about him meeting Maggie, I mean, exactly that it's not Josette.
It's
and
Maggie,
how does he not know when he's talking to her that it's not Josette?
I mean, the thing is, if they, there are ways around this that they could have done. Like they could have changed Maggie's hair, or they could have changed Maggie's makeup, or even if Maggie talked, it said before, if she talked with the French accent, that would have thrown David. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, she looks like Maggie, but it's Josette.
Even though when you want to even go into it even further, if this was Martinique, Angelique would not be a white, blue-eyed blonde woman. So
well, yeah,
that's
of course.
Later on. That's
but
later on.
We are living in the '60s, and segregation was just starting. So
let's be fair.
It had something to do with that. That's terrible if it's true. But
let's be fair here. Let's be fair. David does talk about the fact that he tells Vicky, because he doesn't want to say anything about it. Then he finally confides in Vicky, and he says to Vicky, she's different. She's different. I don't know why about her. This is different than, and so there is an attempt this is the longest I've done with her. I've never talked with Josette before that. So there is an attempt that they're trying.
Oh yeah, I got.
To make.
When David said that, I thought it was because she was more fleshy. She wasn't see-through. So that's how I took it. So yeah, but when I read it now that you pointed out, it could be read that way. Yeah, I do understand now.
Thank you, and I think that's what they were trying to convey. The kid everybody knows the kid is bright, and the kid has talked with Josette allegedly many times, and we've ever seen him do it on the show. And so there's got to be it's just that I don't think he hasn't figured it out yet. Because if he did, then he'd be blabbing to everybody, that's Maggie, that's Maggie.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when Victoria was tied up in the old house, he never told anyone, so who knows what David would do.
That was,
God, that's right.
Well, but he finally told.
After it was dragged out for a whole episode by Burke.
That was really dragged out.
It took a whole episode for Burke to get it out.
Vicky dragged this out of him. Now that David is a very close to the vest kid because of all the things that he's gone through. So it's very hard for him to come out and talk to people. But
his friends are ghosts, so his human interaction is very limited, isn't it? Outside of the family. So.
Well, David, who does David see? Who does that kid ever play with? Who does he see on a daily basis?
See later. Now, right now, you don't see that.
Well, he doesn't go to school. The only people he hangs around with are adults. And he has
ghosts for friends.
And to be honest, the youngest person he mixes with is 10 years older than he is, because he's 10.
So the writers did.
10, 11.
The writers did figure that out, and later on, there is going to be a playmate for him, which would too. For David. Exactly, we're going to get a number of playmates for David. In fact, at the end of the show, there was talk of a romance between the female character that was David's playmate, but it never. That
would have to be way into the future, I hope.
That's right, way in the future.
Another thing I found slightly odd is that when David's speaking about Josette and Victoria is the spectator here. And Roger's trying to sit there and say that's in your head, stop making this up and whatever. It's weird that Victoria doesn't say anything about, because she's experienced Josette firsthand on quite a few occasions. So it's kind of strange that she doesn't actually speak. Well, wait just a minute. Actually, if it wasn't for Josette, David would have been burned alive. If it wasn't for Josette, I would have died. If it wasn't for Josette, you know what I mean? So I would have been still locked up in the room while Roger's pretending he's a ghost outside the door. But but I found it quite strange that she doesn't really say anything about whether Josette's real or not, which I found quite interesting. Because
actually she does, though. I mean, she brings her up on several occasions, as you just specified.
Well, yeah, she's brought it up in the past, but the one time that David, Roger's having a go at David, saying that he's making this up, that she doesn't exist, and Victoria's standing there. It's funny that she doesn't say, "Well, wait just a minute," or something. She doesn't. She listens to him. I mean, when her and David are talking, it's a bit different. But when David's actually being chastised for the simple fact that he believes that Josette exists, and he's seen Josette, she kind of just stands there, and you're thinking to yourself, is like,
but
Victoria.
Don't you guys whip the waffle back and forth, because when you got Elizabeth and her brother talking, for one instant you actually think that they believe what he's saying, and then the next instant they don't believe it. So there's no consistency.
Well, this is a speculation, but I'm thinking that one reason she might not have stood up for him was because they were both pissed at him because he to the old house and they were telling him not to, and they had to run after him.
But I guess
bad about.
Well, I guess Victoria and David seem to be friends now, so I guess that sort of thing. I guess if it was happening when they were foes, where David wanted to get rid of her in this major thing, it would have got sticking up for David would have won her a lot of brownie points with her relationship.
Right. Exactly.
So, is there anything else that we want to discuss about these episodes before we get to our character breaks? I guess we're into our character breaks. So, people, let's discuss our favorite character for these episodes and our least favorite character of these episodes. So, we'll start with you, Vicky. Who's your favorite character and who's your least favorite character and why?
Okay, my least favorite character is Elizabeth Stoddard because they don't give her any anything during these few episodes. She's kind of weak, and it's really kind of saddening actually, because she's the strongest character actually on the show for the last how many episodes we've watched. And I would have to say my strongest character is going to have to go to Barnabas because he sucks out all the oxygen out of the room. We all know he does. I know you love him, Keith. Say something.
No, I'm not. I mean, I like Barnabas, but he's not my favorite character in Dark Shadows.
Well, I wouldn't say he's a favorite character. I'm just saying that he sucks all the oxygen out of the room, which makes him an extremely strong character.
Yeah, it does make.
But Louis Edmonds and Victoria Winters, Alexander Moltke, everybody else. Do you see them dwindling by the wayside when he comes into Essence?
Yeah, I have to say that there's a lot of people that get thrown to the wayside in these blocks of episodes, sort of thing, and it's basically.
And it's not that I don't love Barnabas. Please don't look for my phone number and try to kill me. It's not that I don't love him. I honestly just cannot stand watching all these great characters get thrown on the wayside. That's really what I think. But that's me. So.
What about yourself, Tom? What's your favorite character and your least favorite character for these episodes?
Well, I will tell you that Jonathan's portrayal is going to probably outshadow most in these blocks, and so I want to be fair, and I don't want to cop out. I love Jonathan's portrayal because that stands alone. But other than that, I did like Robert Geringer's portrayal of Dr. Woodard. I personally think that he's a lot sharper on focus, more compassionate, more empathic. He's trying to.
Old Doctor or the new one? There's two of them. Which one?
Yeah, I know, no, and I was going to say,
the first one.
Geringer is number 2.
Yeah,
Dr. Woodard number 2. Geringer takes charge. He really inserts himself into the show. You like it. I wait to see him when when I was watching these things, and he appeared. They go that kind of thing. But it was like my grandmother watching old episodes of Superman, and every time he appeared, she owed near her seat. No, I didn't fall out of my seat, but I did feel that he was definitely an asset to the show. And I think as a new character, I think, in my opinion, he was the best. The reason they got rid of my worst is Woodard number 1, Woods. And he was on one more time, and I think this is why they got rid of him. That he tried in the second time he was there in this block. He tried to be a little more sympathetic than he was. He was very stuffy.
I loved him. I don't understand why everybody has such a problem with him.
I don't think it worked. I think when you compare it with
he was so much more of a convincing doctor, though. The next guy that came in, the one that dies and figures out all the stuff.
You talking about the third one? We're not talking about that one yet.
We're talking about there's only Woodward 1 and 2 at the moment.
Oh my God! I keep going ahead.
There were 3 of them, and we're not there yet for Peter Turgeon, who was the third actor who played Dr. Woodard. That's what you're talking about. But so the second. I just think there are a lot of good things to be said about him, and the reason they got rid of Woodard number 1 was because he wasn't cutting it. I think he tried the second time. I think they wanted more empathy. I get this impression, this gut feeling, that they wanted out of Woodard, and Wood could not do that. He couldn't make up. Geringer made that job. So that's my take.
Well, my favorite character, well, I'm going to start with my worst character. And I guess my worst character is that I guess it's kind of Joe in this segment. And the reason why I'm saying Joe in this segment, because he's kind of reminds me, and this has to do with my feelings of Dracula. Because he's playing that Jonathan Harker kind of type of character, even though Maggie's more the Lucy character than she's Mina, but anyway. But I find that it's kind of I just find that he should be more stronger, more heroic, more I'm protecting my woman, I'm not, kind of thing. And he's kind of a bit weak, and it has nothing to do with Joe the actor. It has to do with the Joe the character. And I just think that he could have been a bit more robust, a bit more heroic, a bit more manly, a bit more, this is the woman I love, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect her.
As much as
and it just seems to be like, like when Maggie kicks him out of the house, he doesn't put up much of an argument. And, I just thought they could have done more with him. And I just think that he could have shined. Now, as we know, when we get later on, Joe's character, the actor playing Joe really gets to show
Joe
his chops.
shines eventually.
But at this point, I just think that he's kind of like still the uninfluential person. He's the sidekick man, the sidekick to Burke when Burke's
right.
saving somebody, or the sidekick, and it's almost like the sidekick person has a chance to become the hero, and it's kind of wasted sort of thing. And I'm talking about these blocks, folks, not overall just in these blocks. So yeah, I kind of would have wanted more from Joe. He didn't do a bad job. It's just I just think it could have been more, something a bit more for me.
I don't think they gave him enough to do, but it's an interesting comment. I hadn't thought of that when you likened him to Jonathan Harker in the Dracula, and indeed he is.
And Jonathan Harker was so ineffective in Dracula. It's kind of like, okay, you get him in the beginning, and that's the victim, and that when he goes back to London,
Joe's the same way here.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. And it's kind of like sort of thing for me. So, but my favorite character has to be Willie. I love the diversity in Willie. I love the complex Willie that we're getting. The Willie who is the bully, the villain, the horrible person who's now the abused, the victim, and how he's changed and how and there's so many complexities to Willie.
Don't you find it really hard to take how he's being abused, though? Actually, it's just it's so intolerable.
It's terrible.
Yeah, but the thing is that he will put himself in harm's way, and knowing that basically he could be bitten and he could be killed at any moment, doing what he's doing.
But he's trying to help everybody.
But he's protecting someone. And I love the complexity that Willie's got. I think this has a lot to do with the actor John Carlin putting this forth. I don't know if you would have given anyone else these lines, would you get the same kind of, and it does remind me of, month after month, my favorite character was Laura Collins because of the diversity, and there's so much scope, and it's like, it's like a diamond prism where there's so many different prisms going on here, and we're experiencing so many emotions mixed up. And that's what I liked about Laura. It's like she's the villain, but yet there's this victimization that goes on with the Laura character. And I'm finding, Willie's not the the villain here. Willie is the victim, but he's not playing the victim. He's playing someone he's nurturing and trying to take care of it. But at the same time, he is very dedicated to Barnabas at the same time, which is like, he doesn't need to be. He could just be like the person who's like, okay, I'm going to do what you say. I'm not going to like it, but I'll just do it. But he's not like that at all. He's also trying to protect Barnabas at the same time. And he's been trying to protect these women at the same time. So we got this tortured character, which I really, really like. And I think that, Willie is shining so much at this moment that every time I see Willie, my heart goes out to him. I feel sorry for him. And I actually feel a lot of empathy towards Willie. And out of all the characters, I have more empathy towards Willie than actually with Maggie for some reason. So,
well, again, that's a tribute to Carl in terms of the way he was able to emote.
And I love Kathleen Scott. I love her. And nothing against her, but Willie stole it for me. Every scene that Willie's in, he's stealing. I mean, he steals the scene out of Barnabas, and that's really hard to do in this segment when everything's geared towards Barnabas and the story of Barnabas.
I think there's actually
Willie steals it. So
I think there's actually a synergy effect, if you think of it that way, where Barnabas is Willie, and of course it's speculation. Maybe this is the real side of Willie that Jason never saw it. Jason said, I don't know this man. And this is the real side of Willie that has always been out there but never had a chance to express himself, which is to protect others. And in a sense, he's also saying this, I'm the better person because I'm willing to stick my neck out and have you do whatever you have. But I'm still going to stick my neck out, be the better guy, take the high road, and protect these people. This is, of course, what we see. This is not, of course, what the two of them see with each other, with Barnabas' neurosis. And I don't trust you, and I don't trust him, and I don't trust her. Willie is trying to say, I know that, but I love you anyway. And there yet, but that relationship is starting to grow, and you can see it right there.
Yeah. So now we're coming to our Morning Has Broken segment where we'll give our final thoughts of the Dark Shadows episodes for 222 to 243. So, Tom, what are your final thoughts of this block of segment? This block of
it's a nice development block. You have the major development of a relationship between Maggie. It comes to the fore. We learned that he wants to convert her into the bride that he lost 200 years ago. We have the attacks her. It's not just cows anymore. He's and Ackerman. Let's not forget the name of the first woman he ever attacked, Jane Ackerman. And that's mentioned. That's another act. But we move very, very quickly on. We know how she don't see the. You used to see all those exteriors, the film that they did. You're now seeing that that's starting to, with one exception, when Carolyn and Vicky are going to the old house, and I think they used an old one, the two of them, but with the exception of that, you're beginning to see that a lot less, and you've got, and you've got the kidnapping, you've got the dinner, the sequence. Which it was, by the way, reproduced in the House of Dark Shadows between Barnabas and, there in the House of Dark Shadows between Barnabas and Maggie, but it's reproduced here. You also have it. You also have it in the '91 remake. There are a lot of things that Curtis took out of the original and put into that. The only thing I was very upset about was while Barnabas is wooing Josette as Maggie in this dinner sequence, some stagehand coughs backstage. That ruined everything in the moment. But other than that, things are now, and of course they got to do something with the Jason McGuire listening. So they have that in the background. But that is now going to temporarily take the floor. In the last episode, Jason says, the last scene, we got to get married. And Liz is like, what? So it's coalescing. It's getting together. I don't blame all the bloopers that they made because of the fact that this was a strike and they had to work 6 hours, as I said, after taking a week and a half off. You get what you pay for. You get what you wish for. So I don't blame them for all these bloopers, so many of which I couldn't even mention on here, and we'll mention it another time. But that's my take.
What about yourself, Vicky? What's your final thoughts of these episodes?
I like how they congeal. They kind of wrap up stuff where we didn't have some kind of solid. What do I want to say? With the Paul Stoddard thing and everything else.
Yeah, it's kind of a reprieve from that. So for a while.
It is a little bit, and it's kind of engaging having a new storyline to start to follow, and we've got the big star of the show now that's on there, so everybody knows what's going on, and everybody will follow this more. But I'm kind of missing the black and whites, though.
We're still in the black and whites, Vicky. You're way ahead of us. So.
Yep. You're being too proactive,
I am so
Vicky.
sorry. I know I'm into episode 470. I am so sorry. I can't get out of the whatever.
storyline.
I'm sorry. You guys keep being mean.
Well, it's something for the fans to look forward to when it doesn't go to color.
I'm into the first time hops.
Now,
So if anybody's listening, don't hate on me. Just keep watching because it gets to be color and you get time hops and it starts to get really fascinating.
Okay, now as far as my views of these episodes, I really, really like the seduction of Maggie and Barnabas. I love that dance that they play with each other. That kind of starts with the first meeting, her being scared, but at the same time that there's this, he's seducing her, and then we get to the Josette. I like that storyline a lot. I do. I know that we poke fun at this because it just keeps everything light and not as serious. But I have to sit there and say that I am watching this. There's not one episode during this block that I found myself mind wandering or thinking, get on with it. Can we just get on with it? And I don't feel that during this block. And I have to sit there and say that the Barnabas character is a fascinating character. And because we don't know the rules of him being a vampire and what those rules are, it kind of sets you on a bit of edge because you're not quite sure what can stop him. We're not sure if there's garlic, holy water, or is it a cross? Nothing. We don't know any weaknesses that Barnabas has outside of sunlight, which I think is quite interesting because that keeps us on our toes. I also like the idea that we have, characters that we think that what we've seen before, this is what we're going to get, and we've seen them change. Just the fact of Willie. We finally got Sam coming out of his alcoholism, that he's mourning the missing Maggie, and he hasn't turned to the bottle, which I think is finally we're dealing with a more complex Sam, which is like Sam's turned a corner here. And I quite like that. I do find that when we get to Collinswood that everyone there is slightly misplaced a little bit. I'm sure that they'll come into their own in later episodes, but at the moment they're kind of just on the outside of everything that's going on. And I'm hoping that in the next few episodes that they're able to rein these people back into the storylines and make them interesting and make sure that they jigsaw puzzle their way into the storyline sort of thing to make them interesting. Because at the moment, we're kind of getting some of the older characters reverting back to types before Barnabas arrived that we got before Laura Collins, and I hope that doesn't happen. But I think that I can understand why Dark Shadows gets, the calling that it has. It's because of these episodes and these episodes after this that gives, Dark Shadows the legacy and the legend that it will become after that we're talking about today. And it's because of these episodes that is the reason why we had Dark Shadows, and Dark Shadows is in the heart and the minds and the love of all the fans and and I guess if you were going to start Dark Shadows from scratch, this is probably the point that and you really want to get into the meat of Dark Shadows, this is probably where your starting point will be, which is normally when in syndication, this is the starting point of Dark Shadows. So, but yeah.
I guess this is the precursor to Dark Shadows that everybody knows, because a lot of people have not watched the first 100 whatever episode.
When Dark Shadows normally goes into syndication, it's normally starting with Willie opening the casket.
Yeah, 210. The opening of Barnbas.
So... But I think that everyone does a fantastic job, though. I have to say, there's a lot of great acting going on here. And I said before, outside of Laura Collins, that Phoenix storyline being so tight, it's good that we got some meandering going on for about two of our episodes of Dark Shadows until 210, and now we're getting the tightening of the storylines again, which I'm very, very pleased about. I'm actually stay awake. I do have a habit when they do wander around to doze a little bit because I'm getting old, but I have to say they're very strong, and yeah, I really like this block of episodes.
Right.
So that brings us into Tune In Next Time, and of course, in Tune In Next Time, we will be covering the Mask. Oh, the Murder at the Rue Morgue, the Edgar Allan Poe. Sorry, people, we're doing Murder at the Rue Morgue, and we're also covering the Bela Lugosi film, the The Murder of the Rue Morgue in our next months of Elementary, my dear. So we will be discussing and we'll be looking at the godfather and grandfather of crime stories, written by Edgar Allan Poe. So make sure you tune in next week. Of course, we'll be continuing our Dark Shadows. That will be at the end of the month. And of course, if you do want to know more information, please sign up for our newsletter at www.llpodcast.com and let you know. I also say that we are looking at all the pet photos that you sent to us, and we will announce our winner soon.
Yay.
And we will be sending out a hoodie to that person. I also want to let people know that all the pet photos that we had, though you may not have won this month, we are going to keep continuing this pet theme going through, and you might win one in the forthcoming months. So don't worry. If you didn't win one this month, you probably eventually will get a hoodie for all those people.
I haven't even got a hoodie, so don't feel bad, people.
You work here. We don't give freebies to people. We work here. If you want it, you can buy it at cost. So no, of course you. So of course, as all our listeners know, you can find us on our social media platforms, which is the Facebook group that we have on Facebook, Twitter, the Tumblr, and Pinterest. And of course, if you're looking for some exciting pictures of Dark Shadows and pictures that you might not seen anywhere else, you can probably look in our Pinterest account. Just go to Pinterest and type in Literary License Podcast, and we have a whole folder there of interesting pictures from movies that we have covered and books and also Dark Shadows. And of course, you can find us on some of your favorite platforming channels like Podbean and SoundCloud. But of course, if you love your YouTube, we're on YouTube as an audio tube. So we got our own YouTube channel. And of course, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Cashbox Radio, and various other favorite Podbean or podcasting platforms. So I guess this is time to say goodbye. So just make sure you come in next week and listen to Murder of the Rue Morgue to hear about the grandfather of all murder mysteries. And we'll see you then. So it's good night for myself, and good night, Vicky.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, Tom.
I have to say,
good night, everybody.
Take care of each other. Love to all.
And remember, Rondo deadline is in 2 days as we tape this on the 27th. Hopefully, we want to thank, and I certainly am extremely grateful for the support of the fans regarding that.
Yes, and thank you for everyone who's voted for us so far. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And it's good night for me. And just remember, we are in interesting times, a time that will live through history. 2020 will be a year that we probably won't forget. So
no, 2020 is going to be a year that totally fucking sucks. Let's just say it like it is.
Well,
right.
I just think that because we're living in the times we are, just remember to keep safe and keep well. And it's good night for myself, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. If you cry for help, there's no help